Okay, we're going to start on, good morning, start on Daf Nun, that's 58. And we sort of left off in this middle of towards the end of this sugya that started with Mar Zutra, Breder of Nachman, in the name of Nachman. Okay, we'll go over that just outside. Thank Hashem that we're able to learn every day. So we're learning, we should have the base of Migdash. Okay, so we said like this: if someone had a promissory note that the thank you. That the arrangement in the promissory note was that when it comes to collection, instead of the normal collection of baininess, which is an intermediate quality property, this arrangement was that he was going to get from the best, the superior quality. That was the arrangement. So that's what he should collect from. The only thing is, if the borrower, the debtor, passes away, and now the creditor is collecting from the orphans, so then it goes down all the way to Ziburis. It gets from the lowest level, even though the document itself said that this is going to be different, and you were going to be able to collect from the best, but because that's what he's going to collect from Ziburis, which is the inferior quality. That was the statement from Mar Zutra Breder of Nachman. Now Abaya says, okay, that's fine, because you always a creditor is supposed to collect from the intermediate, but nevertheless, when it comes to collecting from orphans, it goes down to the inferior. So the same thing here, it's supposed to collect from the superior, so it goes down to the inferior when he's collecting from the orphans. Now Rava has a problem with this, and Rava said that Midairaisa, a creditor is always supposed to collect from Ziburis. He proves it. He has a verse. The verse says that the creditor is supposed to wait outside while the debtor goes inside and brings him something to collect from. What's he going to bring out? He's going to bring out his worst properties, his worst possessions. Not going to give him his best things. So he's going to give him. He has to stand outside. He can't go inside and take for himself what looks the nicest. So that's the case. So we know already that he's supposed to get from the worst. The only thing is, we didn't want to discourage people from lending money, so the sages instituted that you should get from the intermediate. But that was an institution from the sages. So if you're collecting from orphans, so then we put it on the biblical law, which is from the inferior quality. But that's because that was the original law anyway. Because originally it was supposed to be from the inferior quality. It was only because we wanted, the sages instituted that we shouldn't discourage lending, so they instituted that it should be from the intermediate. But over here, Rava's question was, over here, where he wrote in the document that I'm going to collect from the superior quality, from the idios, so then how does that go to the inferior when the person passes away? What we normally, he goes to the inferior because that was the base law anyway. But over here, that's not the base law, because what they wrote in the document is the base law, whatever they made up. Okay, so that was Rava's question. We asked the question on Rava, go to the Brisa, Tani Avram Chuzah, that it seems like you collect, even in such a case, you collect from the orphans, only from the lowest property. We said no. What Avram Chuzah was talking about was if this inferior quality of the perpetrator by damages was at the same quality, the same level as the superior quality of the victim, then that's what you would get. You would get from his inferior quality. In other words, the sages instituted that there's a biblical law that someone that causes damage, he has to pay from the superior quality. But whose superior quality? The superior quality of the victim, which means that even though the perpetrator has much greater quality, he doesn't have to give that from a biblical level. The sages instituted this a tikkun olam. The sages instituted that he should have to give from the best, from the perpetrator's best property. Could be 6 levels up, right? So when it comes to such a case where you're collecting from orphans, so it goes down to the biblical level of the superior quality of the victim, but the inferior quality of the perpetrator. So that's.
I don't know if it's related or anything. Maybe it is, but is there any concept of ayin la'ayin, shin shin, like eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth? Does that apply to damages also with property, or is that just
That was just how we evaluate damages. That what would the value of an eye cost? What would the value of an eye cost?
Okay. It's not literal.
Well, we say now, but we have a statement from Rabbi Eliezer Nivasa. No, we didn't go through it, but you told me there's a note there. He says, he seems to say exactly this case where you're going to collect from, what was the statement? That you can't collect from orphans. You can only collect from orphans from the inferior property, even if the document said that you're going to collect from the best property, which is exactly the opposite of what Ula said. So the Gemara says, no, that you didn't get it right. What it said over there was that you collect from the inferior quality, like this. Now, let's explain it according to Taisus. This is where we left off yesterday. Sometimes there's a property, this is the way Taisus explains it. Sometimes there's a property that is a superior level property. The only thing is, it's at the edge of a lake or a river. Now, what's growing along the edge of the river doesn't really last because the water comes over and just washes it in, and it could get lost easy. So even though the base property is a superior quality, but what's running along the side is more inferior, is even worse than worse property. So if someone damages that type of property, so then they only get from ziburis, when they only get, instead of collecting from the best property, which normally damages gets from the best property, but that property is not even considered a regular property, because what you try to do over there is you just want people to eat it and pay you for it just quickly before it gets lost. So that's considered like a regular debt. Now, when the rule by a regular debt is when it comes to collect from orphans, you have to collect from the inferior. So that's what that statement was talking about, Rabbi Eliezer Nivasa, that you collect from the inferior, even though it's considered a good property. Yeah, it's a good property, but it's the edge of the good property. And over there you get from the inferior because it's considered, it turns into a debt. That's the way Taisus explained it. It seems easier than Rashi. Okay, today we'll start from it's is it 50? It's 50a. It's about 10 lines from the bottom. Is that correct? Okay. We had a statement in the Mishnah that when it comes to collecting from orphans, you only collect from the inferior quality. In other words, even though, so very good, very good. Jonathan saying, is that because of Rahmanas? Let's see in a second. That's the Gemara here. So even though there's different qualities of property, and when it comes to damages, it's usually from the best property. When it comes to creditors, it's usually from the intermediate. When it comes to a woman's ksuba, it's the inferior. But when it comes to collecting all of that from orphans, they all go to the lowest level, to the inferior quality. Oh, we didn't have Rav Achtavai in a while. Yeah, hope Ramesh is doing well in Eretz Yisrael, right? This is in Eretz Yisrael now. When Yossi, Ramesh's son, would come over here, so for some reason we called him Rav Achtavai. I'm not sure why. Like this time, I think made that up. Or maybe Yitzi.
Who's Rav Achtavai?
I don't know anything about him. Okay. Rav Achtavai Barami. Yisaimim Shamru. When you said that orphans, you collect from the inferior, you collect from them, only from their inferior quality property. You don't take their better property. It's a very basic question. Ketanim, ayafilu gedailim. When you said orphans, did you mean children, or did you mean that they just don't have parents? There was this guy in Bell Harbor. Label Goldshire, remember Label? The old man. He was a partisan during the war. He was a strong guy. Anyway, he passed away probably close to 100 in his 90s for sure. Anyway, he used to walk back and forth with a cane or two canes. He would say, Habrachmanas. That means have pity. Ich bin a Yasam from Beide Zeiten. I'm an orphan from both sides. He's 90 years old. But so anyway, so what do we mean over here, orphans? Do we mean children, or do we mean that he just doesn't have parents? That he doesn't have his.
You mean like orphan without, like someone without children?
No. When you say an orphan, at what age do you stop considering him an orphan? Right. You said you can. So, what's the basis of this question? We'll see in a second. Takanti David Rabbanan Gabi asked me, is this just a, like you said, a rachmanis that we have because they're children and there's no one to take care of their property, to make claims for them, and this, we're going to collect rent. Who's going to help them sell properties to get better property? Who's going to assist them? So when it comes to taking, confiscating property from them to pay debts and pay this and that, we only take from the inferior quality because they don't have people to help them. That's only for children that the sages instituted this. That when it comes to confiscating, you should take the least, at least the most inferior property. Or maybe because maybe we could say like this: it never entered the malva's mind. The malva means the creditor, the lender. Never entered his mind the misleva v'nafli nechsi kamiyasmi dahavli noel delis. Maybe we can say like this: why does a borrower pay from the intermediate? Because we don't want to discourage the lender from lending if it's going to be the worst. If the borrower only pays his worst property, then every time the lender lends, he's always going to come back with the worst property. So, that's every time he lends, it's going to be a loss for him. Not a loss of money because he's going to get the same value, but it's going to be a loss of effort.
We're talking about like as a guarantor.
No, not just the guarantor. When it comes to payment, if you, let's say you lend me money, okay? Comes to pay back, you're going to take property that I have. But I have three types of property. One is worth whatever amount, but it's in a very far away place and the land is arid, it's very hard to work with, but it's a large property. And then the best is a small property. It's in Manhattan. Sure. No, it's probably agricultural somewhere in,
southern plantation.
In the tropics. Yeah. And then, so which one do you collect from? So on a biblical level, you collect from that worst land, and on a rabbinic level, you collect from the intermediate. Why did
level and what
the worst property?
Right.
And on a rabbinic level, you collect. So the rabbis came in and upped it one level that you collect from the intermediate. Why did they do that? Because they don't want to discourage people from lending. If every time you lend, you're going to get paid back from this inferior quality, so you're not going to lend. So they made it in the intermediate level. Now, when the rabbis did that, they did it for regular cases. But if the case over here is, let's say, that the borrower passed away, and now the lender's collecting from the children, so then it goes down to its biblical level. Now, which is in the inferior quality. So now what we're saying is like this: does it really matter?
Oh, because they're orphans.
Well, we said because they're orphans, but we're saying that since it never entered the mind of the lender that the borrower was going to pass away, so he's not going to say, I'm not going to lend because maybe the borrower is going to pass away and I'll be left with this and that, with the inferior quality. By him, he thinks he's going to get the intermediate. So it's not going to stop him from lending, because passing away, it's not something that even entered his mind that maybe I'm going to end up with this situation. Well, yeah, if he's in his 90s, that's a different story. But then he would probably write a special document. But in a regular case, we don't have to institute. The rabbis didn't need to institute anything better for orphans than what there is on the biblical level, because it's not in the mind of the lender that this should happen.
Yeah, just the false.
So our question is, when we said that you collect from orphans, from the inferior quality, is that referring to children, orphans, or is that even to adults? That's Rav Achterbe's question. Yeah, probably if the land was actually the value, then they would take the land. If it wasn't the value, then they would sell it and give him whatever the value was. Yeah. Naftali, you wanted to ask something?
No, I was just talking to myself. I was just saying to myself that unless there's a contract specifying otherwise, the term of a loan is 30 days. So
Right.
it explains why somebody really isn't expecting to end up in this position where he's dealing with orphans.
That's a good point. Also, the loan is, the typical loan is 30 days. So, yeah. Very good. That's a good point. Okay. Like a nazir. Hilka Chafil Gedalim Nami, therefore would apply to adults as well. Okay, Tashima. So come and listen. This is the question. Is it by children or is it by or is it also for adults? The Tani Abaya Kshisha. Abaya the elder. Kashish means old. Because this is a Tana. This Abaya is a Tana. Usually Abaya is a Amira. We're teaching in a Brisa. Abaya is an Amira. This is an earlier Abaya. Is there a note on him in there?
Abaya the elder. By Abaya the elder, who transmitted only a few statements in the Talmud, was apparently a second-generation Babylonian Amora. The title elder was used to distinguish him from Rava's colleague Abaya, who belonged to the question.
Right. Very good. Okay. So they point that out. Well, it says Yisaimim Sha'amru. He teaches that when we said orphans, Gedalim, it's referring to adults. And for sure, it's referring to children. Here we have our answer. Orphans means not only children orphans, but even adult orphans. Okay, the Gemara says that was talking about when someone comes to collect money from the orphans. So he has to make an oath, even if he has a document. He has to make an oath that it wasn't paid back. Because if the father was around, the father could have claimed that, make an oath that I didn't pay you back. Maybe I paid you back anyway. What are you doing with the document? I don't know. So because the father's not around, so we'll make that claim for the children as well. It's called Taminan Liyasmi. We assist them in there. They don't know what to claim, so we can assist them. The Bezdin, usually the Bezdin doesn't interfere with the claims of the Bezdin doesn't say, why don't you say this? Why don't you say that? You know, they say whatever's the truth. They don't assist, don't act as lawyers to the litigants. But over here, when there's an orphan, the Bezdin will step in and say that there is something that you could have said, and they'll actually apply an oath to the other party, because the father could have said that. They will step in and assist the orphans. Well, maybe what it means over here is that when we said orphans, it's referring to a different law. It's referring to a law when it comes to collecting from orphans that the creditor needs to make an oath that it wasn't paid back. The gadol that he's an adult, but since he doesn't know what his father, all the dealings of he did pay back, he didn't pay back, he doesn't know what's going on with this. This is his who paid back his father. His father paid back the person he didn't. He doesn't know that, so therefore he's considered like a child, even though he's an adult, because he doesn't know about it. But maybe when it comes to the ziburis paying from which type of property, inferior property or superior property, why should an adult only pay from the inferior quality? That was only an institution that we made to help out youngsters who don't know how to sell property to get the better deal and this and that. So we said that to assist them, like Rahmanas on them, this, but he's an adult. he can pay from the better property. He has worse property. He'll take care of that. He'll trade it for this, for that. He knows how to handle.
Does an orphan need to have two parents alive, or?
We're talking about the father's business. Okay, so maybe it's no proof from Abaye Kshisha that it's referring to orphans means also adults, even though Abaye Kshisha said that was talking about a different law where that would be logical for him to say that. But by us, maybe that's not the case. The Gemara concludes V'hilchasa. The halacha is, I think they assume that usually when it says V'hilchasa, it's the Goinim stepping in, but I'm not sure.
The Goinim came
later. They came later, but there are some additions in the Talmud that are from the Goinim. I think there's an assumption that when it says V'hilchasa was I don't know if there's any comments in your Gemara. V'hilchasa, the halacha is Yisaimim Sha'amru, when we said orphans, Gedolim V'eintzarech Leimer Ktanim, it's talking about adults, and for sure it's talking about children. Bein l'shua, bein l'zvurus, whether it comes to taking notes, whether it comes to paying back from the inferior quality. It's the way the Gemara assumed that Abaye Kshisha would be answering this. We would be answering from Abaye Kshisha. Okay. Right. I'm just saying that the Gemara doesn't always. There's a lot of Gemaras where it doesn't give me a conclusion. Yeah. It just ends with the discussion of, okay, so we didn't have an answer, we didn't have a proof, we didn't have this, and we move on to the next thing. But sometimes it says the hilchasa, the halacha is. So when it adds that in, is that really the Gemara that's saying that, or is that like the editors or something that added that in? I think it's they assume that it's the Goinim that added it.
Say like the rabbi or the rock that cost him this way? Or?
No, they don't even say who it was. And actually, we have a lot of times in the Shulchan Aruch where there's a discussion: do we paskin like this? Do we not paskin like this? And then they say it's based on, did that earlier commentary have the text of the Gemara that said Behilchasa, or did he not have that text? Did he have an earlier edition of the Gemara where the Behilchasa wasn't there? And we have that in different places. Like Garas, the less Hilchasa Kachalhani Rabbasar or something. This. No, the Rambam is later. The Rambam is a student of the Gainim, student of the Gainim. The Rambam and his contemporaries, they're all Rishonim. Okay, those are names we made up. During the Rambam's time, it wasn't called the Rishon. Rishonim means earlier. Achrayim means later. So, yeah, we made up these names, Okay. When it comes to collecting, you don't collect from mortgaged property that's been sold if the person still has property that's not sold. Whereas let's say Reuven owes Shimon money. So Shimon wants to collect the money. He goes to Reuven. The Reuven has property there, and he used to own nice property, superior, intermediate, and also inferior property. But during this time, since he borrowed the money, he's already sold off the superior quality and the intermediate quality, and all he's left with is the inferior quality. So comes Shimon and says, look, I'm really supposed to be getting a better property here. Now, Levi purchased the intermediate property, which is really what I should be collecting from. So we tell Shimon that you can't go to Levi and take away the property that you purchased, even though there's a lien on it, because Reuven still has property. When Levi purchased that property, he did nothing wrong, because he knows that he left property by Reuven for the people to come and collect. He didn't take his last property, he left him with property. So you can't collect from the purchasers if Reuven still has any sort of property, even though it's not the correct grade of property that you should have been collecting from. So, Ravach Barami has a question. We said this regarding purchasers. What about Matanahech? What is it? What about when it comes to giving gifts? Let's say Reuven gifted the property, the intermediate property, to Levi. can Shimon, who's collecting his debt back, can he go to Levi and say, you got a gift, but that was exactly the property that I was supposed to be getting? From Takantu David Rabbana Mishum Seder L'Kuchas of Matana D'Lekav Seder L'Kuchas Lai. Do we say that the reason why you can't go to Levi, the purchaser, and extract property from him that he had purchased to pay back Reuven's debts? You can't do that because there was a whole transaction there. There was money that was given, and if you confiscate that property, it's going to have to go back and get the money back from Reuven. It's going to be a whole complication. Do we say that's only by a purchaser, but matana, but by a gift? Does lekab say the lakuchas? There's no loss to Levi. He didn't have the property before. He doesn't have it now. It was only a gift, and it was a gift that wasn't given correctly because that was a property that was due to be paid to Shimon. Or maybe matana nami. Even when it comes to a gift, why does someone give a gift? Why did Reuven give a gift to Levi? Because he owed him a gift. He was due. He had to give him a gift. Why do you have to give him a gift? Because Levi did a big favor for Reuven, and Reuven said, "You know what? I have to give him a gift. It's even though it's not a money transaction, but it is a type of a transaction, and so therefore, when you're going to confiscate the gift from Levi, there still is a transaction that we can't put a number on it, but there was something that was going on, and therefore you can't just go ahead and take it away from Levi.
Maybe it was a birthday.
Right. And the fact that he has survived till that birthday is a gift. You want to thank you for existing. Okay. So our question now is, when it comes to confiscating properties, do we say that it's only by sold properties that you can't extract if there's property left by the debtor? Or is it even gifted properties that you can extract? That's our Rav Achta's question. Amalei Mark Shisha Breder of Chistel Ravash. Mark Shisha, it's interesting that Rav Achta asked both of these questions. He quoted as an answer, or they quoted Abaya Shisha. Now in the second question, it's Mark Shisha, totally different, absolutely no connection other than the same word. The son of Rav Chisda answers Rav Ashi. He tells to Rav Ashi. Now Mark Shisha is the son of Rav Chisda, and I believe that it's when Rav Chisda was very old. He's the younger son of Rav Chisda. I think the Gemara discusses this somewhere. Is Mark Shisha the older son, or is he the younger son? Now, if he says old, why is he considered the younger son? It's because he was born when Rav Chisda was old. That's why he's the younger son, and that would make sense why he should be talking to Rav Ashi several generations later. It must have been very old to be able to talk to Rav Ashi. Kashish means old. Yeah. Aramaic. Kashish is old. Yeah.
That's fine. Like if he was older, I think okay, it was the baby was a miracle, but then the younger one had the name
That has right. He was young, right? When did they give them those names? They probably gave him those names after the second one was born.
Right. Junior.
Right. Yeah, there's another Aramaic word for old. It's called atik. Atik is old.
You're Atika.
Yeah, atika. But that means ancient. Kashish just means old.
Or elder, but it doesn't mean elder.
It could mean elder. Shisha. Okay.
So that's the younger someone.
Right.
Be
Exactly. There is a younger.
How do you say younger?
Mar Yenuka. Yenuka means younger. Yenuka means a child. Right. Tashima, come and listen. Shchiv Mira Sha'amar. Someone that was passing away. He's on his deathbed. Shchiv Mira. Mira means ill. He's laying ill. That he says, we're going to say that that's really a document, but he says, Tinu Masayim Zuz Leplaini. Give 200 Zuz to so-and-so. You know, this is his will. Gimel Me'as Leplaini. Give 300 to so-and-so. Vidalad Me'as Leplaini. Give 400 to so-and-so. So he's working this, the numbers are working up a bit. It's good to come later in the will, apparently. He's the third guy gets 400 instead of the first guy gets 200, 200, 300, 400. Now, we don't say that whoever was earlier in the document gets more money. In other words, if there's not enough money there for him to give, what was that, 200 plus 500 plus, if you don't have 900 zuz, right? 200 plus 300 plus 400, you don't have the 900 zuz, you don't say that, well, first let's give to the first one. First, and then we'll give whatever's remaining, we'll give to the second one. What's remaining after that, we'll give to the third one. You don't say that the third one should lose out at the most. We don't say that. Rather, what we're going to do is they'll all lose out in proportion. They'll lose out in proportion. And because he really wanted to give to all of them equally. The only thing is, it's very difficult to utter 3 sentences at the same time. So he had to say one after another, but that wasn't his point. His point wasn't the order there, because he didn't say first, second, third. His point was all of them equally. Lefikach, therefore, where is he? I'm sorry. Lefikach, yeah. Yatzalav Starchayiv Gavim Mikulam. Let's say a creditor comes and says, 1 second, you're giving out this money, you're distributing this money. He owes me money, the person that passed away. So who does he collect from? We don't say that, well, the first one was given already, the second one was given already. Just collect from the last one, because he's the last one, he's the one that the money shouldn't have been given. We don't say that. Rather, what we'll say is you have to collect from all of them in proportion of what they got. So how would that work? The first guy will give a ratio of 2. The second guy will give a ratio of 3. And the third guy will give a ratio of 4, because he got 400. So, each one will give like in proportion. Avalim Amar, but let's say his statement was different. It says, give 200 zuz to so-and-so. Acharav leplani, and afterwards give 300 to so-and-so, but acharav, and after that, give 400 to so-and-so. Then we say, whoever comes first, he's the one that gets the bulk of it. He gets his full amount, and then the next one, whatever's left, and whatever's remaining. Lefikach, yatzalav star chayiv. If there is a creditor that shows up that says, how come you guys are taking the money? I'm supposed to be getting the money. He collects from the last person. Ainlai, if it's not enough, the 400 wasn't enough, then then he'll go to the middle person, he'll take from the 300. If that wasn't enough, 700 was more than 700, we'll go back to the first one also. The kama beinines basha ziburis. And even though all of these properties are the lowest level property, and he's supposed to be collecting from a higher intermediate. He only collects from the lower property, the inferior property, doesn't collect from the intermediate property. Shmamina, what we see from this is so what we're saying over here is, how did this money end up by these people? Because it was in the will, and this was a gift. He was giving them gifts, and nevertheless, they're not going to take from the property that they're supposed to be getting, because these gifts are because you take from the last one, which means that the last gift is the one that, in other words, the previous gifts that were given out, that were distributed, those were already considered given. And it's only from the last one where you begin to take from, because that was the last one to be distributed.
So, the latecomer.
The latecomer.
Who is promissory?
The guy with the promissory note doesn't collect from the earlier properties. He only collects
earlier.
even though those properties may be the one that should be coming to him,
right?
But in those properties were given as gifts. We're seeing that being given as a gift means that it's already out of the debtor's domain, and the creditor collects from the remaining property that was in the debtor's domain.
Earlier, right?
So we're seeing that it applies also to a gift. The Gemara says, "You have an answer that by the gifts also they have this institution that you don't collect from the ones that were given." We're talking about over here that when he's distributing that money, that wasn't gifts. That was because he owed it. He owed 200, he owed 300, he owed 400. That was what he was. When it says 1 second, but to newcomer, but it says give. It doesn't say pay. It says to give. It says, yeah, tenu b'chayvi. It says give it because of my debt. It said give, but it's giving, is paying back. It says, but why don't we look at the documents? Shouldn't they collect based on when those loans were made? That's when they should, that's the way it should be distributed.
Wow.
Well, it says, the leker stara, we don't have documents. Gemara says, what do you mean you don't have documents? It says, kol hakodim b'shtar zacha. We're talking about that there are documents. It says, yeah, b'shtar pekadata. That was the will document. In the will document, there was an order, but in the loans, promissory notes, there were no notes there. Okay, Iba Yasema. Basically, what we did over here is what we lost the whole concept of the gift. We just got rid of this whole. We thought we had a proof here, but it turns out it wasn't even gifts. Iba Yasema fila matananami. Really, if you want, we could say that by the gift, we would say that we can go into the recipients and extract from them. My goyim menachem. So why do we say that you only collect from the last one? It means you're not going back to the earlier recipients of the gift. That means a nifsad ala achron. That means that ultimately the one that's going to lose out is going to be the last one. Why? Why is that? In other words, Shimon is coming to Ruvain and he wants to collect the money, but Ruvain passed away. So Ruvain had already distributed gifts out to Levi, Yehuda, and Yisachar. So it turns out that Levi's property that he received as a gift was the intermediate property, which is the one that's supposed to be going to Levi, to Shimon. Shimon's supposed to be getting, because he's a creditor, he's supposed to get from the intermediate. Now, normally, when you're collecting from orphans, it would go down. But here we're not talking about orphans. Here we're talking about that the property is just left Ruvain's possession because he gave it as a gift. Ruvain's still around, he just doesn't have the properties. So he's going to get the property from Levi. Now what happens now is that Levi says that, why am I losing the property? There were recipients after me that he should really go back to Ruvain. Ruvain doesn't have any money. So he goes to Yisachar, to Yehuda and Yisachar, to those people that received after me. He says, you received property from Ruvain, but that should have really been mine. Ultimately, the one that's going to lose out, even though the property that was extracted was from an earlier recipient, but that early recipient is going to go to the later recipients and take it away. So the one that's really going to lose is going to be the last guy that received. If you want, you could say the shavukula that there's no question over here. Why does the last one take? Why does he take from the last one? Because they all had ziburis. They all had the inferior quality. They were all the same type. No one has any, has no rights to any of them other than more than the other one. So you take from the last one. Okay. We don't really have an answer to the question now. Ein meitziyin la'achilas peiros. This was a nice, complicated case. Remember what happened over here? It was a guy that stole a property and sold it. So the original owner of the property goes to the now purchaser of the property and says, that's my property. So he takes the property back. Now the purchaser goes back to the seller, who was a thief, and says, I want money for all things, everything. Anyway, so this thief that sold him the property doesn't have possessions. He's already sold the income that he got from that sold. He's already sold it off to other people, and his own properties are. So now he's going to go to the people that have purchased property from him to get the money for the what he had put into that property.
Thief. Thief.
He's going to go. This is the purchaser goes to the thief who doesn't have this. So the thief now sends him to the people that purchased property from him. He's going to take out from. See, he cannot take from them for the fruits that he ate, because when the original owner came, he made him pay for the fruits that he ate. The original owner lost money on. He gets the property and the fruits. Now he has to go back to him and say, "Those you sold it to me." He has to get the money that he had to pay the original owner. He has to go back to them. So he can't go to them, to the purchasers from that. He can go to the thief, but he can't go to the people that had purchased property from the thief to collect.
But we had learned that he could go to those purchases.
For the actual value of the property, but not for the fruits that he ate.
The improvements that he had done. The example.
For the improvements as well, I think you can't take the value of the property that he lost. He can take from even property that he sold. Then the improvement of the property he can also take. No, it says no. I'm confused about the improvement. Whatever it is, the fruits that he ate in there, he cannot take. Yeah. What did you think it said?
So before I remember we had this scenario, and the original owner gets back its property, and he has the purchaser pays back the original owner for the fruits that he ate, but he also had made improvements to the field and all that stuff that which he would go back to the thief to get reimbursed for that.
Right. The reimbursement can't. The thief doesn't have it. He can't take it from the people that have purchased property from the thief. But he can. Okay. Let's see.
That's the part that I was like,
Let's see.
that wasn't fair for those purchasers, and then it's kind of where it came into that they should have checked, but there was no liens on those properties.
Right. Okay. Well, let's see in here. Let's see in this Gemara. My timer. What's the reason that you can't extract the value of those fruits that were eaten? Amar Ula, Amar Shlakish, Lefi Shein Ksuvim, because it was never in a document. So it looks like it's a milval peh. Milval peh means it's a loan without a document. So therefore, like you were saying, that it was not fair to purchasers to now to go and extract money from them when no one knew that this debt even existed. When do people know about a debt? That's only if there's a document. But this, how much fruits the person ate in the field that he had to pay for, because it turns out the field wasn't the person that sold it to him, that was never written down. That's what Ula says in the name of Rish Lakish. Amalei Rab Abba Ula. Rab Abba says to Ula, to command the says has nothing to do with if it's written in a document, because we have another rule that if a woman wants to get her sustenance, and the daughters of the deceased also want to get the sustenance, they cannot go to people that have purchased property from the husband and to start extracting money. Now, why not? That's considered like a Tanai Ksub. It's considered like an arrangement that was in the document, whether it was written or it wasn't written. It's considered like it's written, and they still can't extract it. So, Amalei. So Ula responds, no. That has nothing to do with if it was written or not. That has to do with the original arrangement was that the husband agrees only to pay with this nourishment for his wife and daughters only if he actually has property that hasn't been sold. But if once it's been sold, that was never part of the original arrangement. There's nothing to do with whether it was written and you can collect, you can't collect. It was never arranged like that. We have the same story where Rabasi says the name of Rabbi Yechon because it wasn't written, and that's why you can't collect. And Amalei Rab Zeir Rabasi, Rab Zeir asks Rabasi, he asked him the same question that Rab Abba asked Ula. What about the nourishment for the wife? And the response was, Amalei Rab Zeir Rabasi responded, that was the original arrangement. That's the way it was arranged in the original arrangement of the ksuba, is that the wife and daughters will collect for their nourishment, but not from property that was sold. Rab Chanina Amar, Rab Chanina says, not because it wasn't written. He says, because there's no way of knowing how much that's going to be. So when a person purchases a property, he doesn't know if it's going to be a little amount of money or a lot amount of money, how much the person is by the fruits. So therefore, it doesn't refrain from purchasing because he doesn't know how much that's supposed to be. So it's not right to go and extract from him property when there was never a set amount. He said, when he would avoid avoiding a property, if you said, well, this person has a debt of $1 million, I don't know if you want to buy this. Maybe he says, this person may have to pay for some fruits that were eaten. It's like, well, how much is that? We don't know. So therefore, it's not right to now extract from that. He says, because it's not a set price. Gemara asks a question. What does Rabbi Chanina really require? Does he require that it's set plus that it should be written in a document? Or does he only require that it needs to be set, but he doesn't care if it's written in a document? So Tashima, come and listen. Misha Mace. Okay, let's leave it over here. We're on top of Nun Aleph. Okay, have a good Shabbos, everyone. Hashem, Sunday, 6. Hashem.